Today I'll be talking about the Gemini New Moon and Saturn entering the sign of Aries. This will be from the evolutionary astrology perspective. This style isn't so predictive. It's more interested in describing the energies, the archetypes associated with all these signs, how they interact with each other, how that is affecting us not only on a global but on a personal level. And then we can leverage our own free will and focused intent and choose on how we want to work with these energies instead of against them for our own betterment and evolution. My name is Bryan Colter, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It sure helps me a lot. So we got a lot of Gemini going on. Clearly, the sun and moon forming the new moon in this sign. But we also have Mercury right next to the sun and moon, also in Gemini. And Mercury is said to be the planet that rules this sign. Here it is in its own sign, effectively on steroids. So much Gemini. Now, new moons themselves are about new beginnings, planting new seeds. The new moon officially happens on May 27th or 26th, depending on what time zone you're in. But the new moon phase continues for about 3.5 days afterwards. So broadly speaking, basically the middle of next week, we're all going to be working with the new moon phase. And that's a good strategy with this event, is think to yourself the evolutionary question, is there a new beginning that I can create in my life? And can this new beginning be imbued with the spirit of Gemini? Gemini is one of the most energetic signs in the entire zodiac because it's a symbol of learning. It's a symbol of intellectual stimulation. It's an air sign. All air signs are associated with the mental plane. The superpower of Gemini is curiosity. And as you think to yourself, what is a new seed I want to put in the ground next week? Well, make sure it's something that fascinates you. Not really been there, done that. Certainly not something that's boring or repetitious or tedious. It wants to play. It wants to have a kaleidoscope of experience, Gemini does. So in light of that spirit, how can you playfully co-create with the divine over the next week and go in a new trajectory in your life that is in alignment with the spirit of the sign? There's much more I could say about Gemini, but that's a good starting point. We immediately want to tie in another major event, one of the bigger events of this year actually, which is Saturn entering a new sign, which it only does once every 3 years, a little bit more. It's been in Pisces for quite some time, since I think March of 2023. And what makes this even more significant is recently, in later March, Neptune also entered Aries. Neptune will be in Aries for the next 14 years. I did a video about that before. If you didn't get to see it, I'll put a link at the end of this video. You'll see the thumbnail pop up on the screen. So what's implicit in this is Saturn's entering Aries and meeting up with Neptune in Aries in the early degrees of that sign. Not only that, but Neptune and Saturn are forming a beautiful sextile aspect, 60-degree angle with that Gemini new moon. And Saturn and Neptune is also forming another sextile to Pluto. And then Pluto in Aquarius is forming a trine to the new moon. So you have a trine to a sextile, forming a beautiful triangle, gorgeous symmetry in the sky right now. Now, trines and sextiles are known as a flowy aspect, very supportive. I say easier. They're a little easier to integrate. But we're going to have to deal with this triangle going on. We already discussed a little bit about the Gemini new moon, but we also need to contemplate, okay, how can Gemini support Saturn, Neptune, and Aries and vice versa? How can Neptune and Saturn support Pluto, and round we go. Saturn likes to challenge us. That's why it's known as the greater malefic, because it does tend to bring hardship into our lives. For example, if we're experiencing a big personal Saturn event, if it's aspecting our sun or something like this, we will synchronistically, therefore, attract hardship into our lives. So we take this idea of challenge and we tie it into Neptune and Aries and try to figure out what that means. But the immediate thought is, okay, maybe I should rise to a challenge. And in order to rise to this challenge, it will take great effort, fortitude, and willpower, concentration, sweat equity, and all that to accomplish that hard work. Saturn also represents the notion of maturity. It's the symbol of wisdom. And it's through that great effort that we get the hard-fought, hard-won wisdom as our prize. And especially while Saturn is in Aries, the warrior, we gain great strength, bravery, and courage, but it's going to take us leveraging an indomitable willpower to achieve that goal, as difficult as it may be. Whenever I think of Saturn in Aries, Saturn being the stoic pillar of strength in the sign of the warrior, I think of the meta-archetype of the war general or the drill sergeant. Now, the sign of Aries and the new moon itself has something in common, even though they're very different from each other, and that's the concept of new beginnings, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and then the new moon is the first of the lunar phases. So, okay, we want this playful, fun, exploratory Gemini new beginning, but yet we have the war general in the mix. We're going to have to figure out, again, how they can support each other. So what hard work can I undertake that will require Aries action? Because Aries represents the outrushing power of spring, okay, that new beginning during springtime where life can really flourish if we're willing to put in the effort. That's the Saturn piece. Well, the major modifier here, of course, is Neptune. So hard work, applying to the concept of Neptune, Neptune being the mystic planet, more generally speaking, it represents the evolutionary process of raising one's consciousness spiritually. It's also the creative visionary planet. Now, it's very interesting because Saturn and Neptune are almost opposites in a lot of ways. Because Neptune represents that which is otherworldly, that which is higher dimensions of consciousness or God consciousness, collective consciousness. Saturn, meanwhile, is of this dense dimension of reality. It does have a reality checkish energy associated with it. It's known as the Lord of Karma, so it has this heaviness. It wants to concretize. It wants to make real. Let's be practical. Let's be focused. Let's concentrate. Let's be of this world. So part of the great challenge or the great work becomes, how can I solidify, how can I make real, Saturn style, that which is coming from higher dimensions, part of my conduit for the muse, my inner creative visionary, and how does my level of spiritual consciousness relate to that idea? If you think of people in the military for a second, we'll bring in the drill sergeant archetype here. You know, I've never been in the military, so I don't really know, but I imagine they wake up early. The drill you see in the movies, you know, the drill sergeant comes in with the whistle, screams the whistle. He wakes everybody up at 4 a.m. Everybody stands up immediately. They're straight. He maybe watches them make their bed impeccably. You know, there's the commitment, the focus, the attention to detail, and all that discipline that's required. And then we contrast that with, let's say, a mystic or somebody who is devoted to their spiritual paths. You know, devotion is a good Saturn word. And they say, you know what? I'm going to work harder in raising my consciousness. And I will commit to meditating 3 hours every single day at 4 a.m. And Saturn says, oh yeah, okay, fine. I'm the cosmic paycheck. What you shall reap, you shall sow. You will accelerate your spiritual consciousness faster than you ever have before, which will position you, because you're operating from that higher level, to be that conduit for the muse in a more pure way. Now, we'll tie this back to Gemini, because again, how does Saturn Neptune support Gemini New Moon through the sextile? But I immediately want to follow the other sextile over to Pluto in Aquarius. Now, for this, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, okay, because Pluto does deal with larger generational cycles, the slowest moving planet. And again, it somewhat recently entered the sign of Aquarius. You've probably seen videos about that before. It will continue to be in the sign until 2044, which it means a lot of different things. But one of the primary ones, in my opinion, is we are now entering into a technological revolution where the rate of technological growth will continue to grow faster and faster and faster, and the world we co-create in 2044 will look almost unrecognizable to the world we live in now in 2025. Will we co-create a more utopian technological revolution or a dystopian one? or somewhere in between. That depends on the choices we make and the average level of consciousness of the collective. So that was really zooming out, big picture, okay? Now we double click and zoom in really close to where we're at now and really look closely at this new moon. Here we are, late May 2025. In light of this larger cycle, Pluto in Aquarius, cementing us into this Aquarian age, this massive 2100-year cycle where, in my opinion, we're officially in it. And as we look at the here and now, how can I work with this Gemini new moon as Saturn enters Aries, supporting Pluto in Aquarius and all the way around through the triangle? What can I do? Little me. What new beginning can I create during this time where I can do my own small part to help bump us on a more positive utopian timeline? One thing I want to say is there's a lot of air and fire in the sky right now. Gemini is an air sign. Aquarius is an air sign. Aries is a fire sign. Air and fire like each other for obvious reasons. This is an invigorating set of energies. It's a kinetic blast of potential. It's active. It's dynamic. It can be quite exciting. So it is a time of new beginnings, new moon plus Aries, first sign of the zodiac. The goal is to plant a seed, and then through our ability to concentrate and commit to a path, accelerate the growth of that seed so it germinates quickly, so we can leverage the energetic blast that we're experiencing with all this air and fire. Now, Gemini, of course, it's the sign of communication. So for you Geminis out there, most of you have the gift of gab or the gift of writing because you're natural teachers and storytellers and learners, as I said at the beginning. And of course, the more you learn, the better of a storyteller you become. That's a big part of your evolutionary journey. Again, if you're a Gemini. But Gemini also represents that which is in the mind, our thoughts, our perception of reality. But the word I want to zero in on here, this is key, is intention. Okay. So we return to Saturn Neptune for a moment. Okay. Now we talk about Neptune basically doing, Saturn Neptune, the hard work of committing to spending X number of minutes per day in alpha or theta state, which is basically light trance or deep trance work. And there's a zillion ways to accomplish that. But, entering into meditative states, the Saturnian variety of meditation techniques, there are many, but one of the primary ones is concentration. Now, Gemini isn't always the sign most known for concentration because the mind is so zippy, it's so free associative. And the collective is experiencing all this air and fire. So the challenge, the Saturnian challenge is, at least at first, to quiet the mind, to quell the riot inside. Attempt to turn down K-fuck radio. That if you can't quiet the mind, it's going to be very hard for you to create that strong intention and concentrate on it in meditative states. Now, if you're a novice meditator, I highly recommend binaural beats. It's a technology. You can find it all over YouTube. You can find them for free everywhere. It's a music that has binaural beats embedded into it. I call it training wheels for the novice meditator. It will help you to enter into theta state much quicker. But again, however you can get into that relaxed state of consciousness, turn down the monkey mind so that you can concentrate on the work. And the work is, what do I intend to do? What is the intention? What is the Geminian intention of curiosity, excitement, and enlivenment that I want to plant into the ground? As a soul incarnate, you are so powerful. Where your attention goes, energy flows. So in a concentrated state of mind, you spend some minutes concentrating on that intention that you have, and you can actually come back to it a few minutes each day. That way, when you actually start that new beginning, it becomes much more powerful because you already did the prerequisite work of focusing on it, empowering it with the power of your mind. So how can I create this little micro seed of change in my life that will continue to grow? over the years. And again, play my own small part within the collective to go more towards utopia instead of dystopia. That's tying in the Pluto and Aquarius piece. And I do realize, you look around, just observe reality now. It doesn't seem like we're really headed towards utopia. Fair enough. There's plenty to be angry about, to be fearful about, to be concerned about. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff going on, that's for sure. I totally get it if you've been experiencing any feelings like that. It can be quite discouraging. But here's the great news. The scale of consciousness is not even. It is logarithmic. So people that are operating from a very high level of consciousness, like total peace, bliss, enlightenment, unconditional love, pure joy, it's very hard for humans to be there and to stay there. I would call that a more evolved state of consciousness. Now, if they were to create a new beginning, right, coming from that state of consciousness, it would be much more powerful. It would have a much more powerful effect on the collective, on the world, than somebody who is coming from a place of rage and hatred and division, jealousy, pride, egoism, enmity. All those, I call them low consciousness emotions, although they are part of the human experience for a lot of folks. When they, through thought, emotion, and action, send that sort of energy out into the field of the collective, yes, it creates change in the world. They're doing their small part to co-create this, but their wave of change is more like a tiny little ripple, whereas, let's say you have some evolved guru mystic on the planet, they create a great change and it can change the world. They create a tsunami of change. Now, for most of us mere mortals that are probably watching this video somewhere in the middle, the good news is when we create change, when we come from love, from unity consciousness instead of polarity consciousness and division, when we bring through our actions more hope into the world, our actions are far more powerful because that scale is logarithmic. It gets more powerful the higher you go up, okay? Is still way more powerful than these wimpy ripples of people coming from more despair states of consciousness. Now, how do you climb the ladder of consciousness? Well, meditation, which circles us back to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So the evolutionary question is, how can I become my own drill sergeant or war general, okay, and apply more commitment and tenacity, create an Aries action towards the exploration of consciousness Neptune style, again, whatever that means for you, to empower this new idea, this new intention, and concentrate on that intention and let it grow within your own mind. And then when you actually make it real, like Saturn ultimately wants to concretize that which is higher dimensional into this new beginning in the middle of next week that is playful, that is exploratory, that fills your heart with curiosity, but also knows will help to create a tsunami of change as we move forward in the next couple decades, again, towards utopia. These are the core evolutionary intentions, with the goal being to expand our consciousness. Thank you.